Welcome to another edition of Bring In the Closers podcast. Ryan Ray, alongside my good friend Ben Samuels. Ben, good to see you, buddy. How you doing?
Doing well. Good friend. That's a different intro. I like that. We're making progress. It's been a good week. You and I saw some baseball games in Dallas last week. I had a nice, relaxing weekend. As you can see, I'm in Houston at the moment in a hotel, but
Yeah, and for the
all good.
listeners' benefit, we are recording 2 episodes this week, so you will see us next week looking exactly the same. Ben will not be in Houston next week. He was in Houston last week by the time you heard this next week, if you can keep up with all of that. Probably not. But anyways, so Ben, last week we got to sit down. I got to meet your dad. Lovely gentleman. Enjoyed that thoroughly. And, it was good just to kind of, minus the 300-degree heat, just to go and to sit down and listen to someone who is been successful like your dad has, learn from, we didn't get to talk a ton of business, but learn this kind of how he sees the world. And we have a guest on today, but I'm just curious, how do you balance that, or how should we balance that in our lives for the listeners? It's hard to get mentors. You talk about the, what's in it for me, bringing value, but I enjoyed it because I don't always get to sit around older gentlemen who have had the success that your dad has and kind of just not pound them with questions, but just throw out something and hear how they think about their perspective. The baseball, we talked about this before, the baseball is kind of a great environment for that, despite the heat, the declining attendance. There's a lot of opportunity there. And do you think that's maybe like this, do you think that maybe that's a better environment, is a baseball game where you're not pressured to talk repeatedly? For an older generation, it's a little bit slower, a game that they grew up with that probably has a little bit more meaning than a younger generation. Is that a good tactic, good tip for listeners to get an older mentor out and hang out with them for a few hours and not feel like they had to question them nonstop, but here's a great hit, here's a question, kind of work it in through the process?
Yeah, I think it makes it a little bit easier to facilitate just kind of genuine flow of conversation. I find sometimes, when I'm sitting in a dinner or something like that with somebody, at times there's like a forced conversation, right? Because there's a little bit of a lull in conversation. There's not something that immediately needs to be said. Maybe both people want to think about kind of what's going on. And so I think a baseball game, or, a lot of deals and things get done on the golf course
Right.
and those kind of things. I think those are just more, that kind of engenders more conversation. And also, if you're able to bond on baseball, you kind of have immediate foundation of something to bond over. And that, I think that also can help the communication going forward as well. But yeah, absolutely.
One thing I'm curious, because I thought about this while we were there, the other thing that golf or baseball does when you're trying to grow a friendship is it also allows for you to attend to regular business, because you're at the baseball game. So if you pick the phone up and check it, I mean, obviously you don't want to be ignoring the person, but you can sit there and you can kind of delve, respond to an email, shoot off a quick text. And the ethos of the whole thing is different, where if you're at a dinner and you pick the phone up, it's almost rude. At a baseball game, everyone's talking. There's going to be some quiet time. So you may see the phone go off. There's no pressure to respond because, a big hit will happen, or the inning will change, or someone will run to the bathroom, or the hot dog guy. So it also actually adds unique elements that you wouldn't find in other spots, because the natural way it flows. So you can actually conduct business while you're not shunning the other person as well.
Yeah, I think it reduces the pressure. I mean, in a 30, 45-minute coffee meeting, I think both sides, especially on, first meeting, are pretty, it's important to make those minutes important and impactful. Whereas if you're talking over, a 3.5 hour baseball game, you can get the same value out of that 45-minute meeting, but it's a lot more relaxed. And also, I think you're able to, get a sense of the other person, just kind of how they operate and what means more to them, and those kind of things. I think those kind of things come to the forefront a lot easier in like those kind of environments where there's not your societal pressure, like you said, at times checking your phone or being able to, be silent for a couple minutes, just kind of be thinking offline. I mean, how many times in a coffee meeting have you been sitting face to face with somebody and there's like dead silence for 2 or 3 minutes? I mean, that doesn't happen, right? And so it just changes the dynamic.
And it also, if you want to take the extreme and you never want to pick your phone up in front of someone, it also does offer more interruptions where you can go to the bathroom, you can go to the concession stand. And so you can actually say, well, I don't want to ever pick my phone up in front of someone if you'll be a hardliner. You can create natural intervals. It's been 2 innings, I'm going to go get a beer or whatever. So you can actually, if you really want to be strategic, you can actually even go to that level where you never pick your phone up in front of them, but you do create intervals that allow that. The other thing, this final thing before we get to our guest here in a second, is because we're good friends, it's easier for me and you to have this conversation. But I got to thinking while we were there, we can sit there and say, hey, we're thinking about leaving this time, or we're going to head out early. But I was wondering, How would you handle that from just your perspective? If you're there, do you have that kind of frank conversation? Do you wait for the other person to initiate it? Because I'll tell you my side. If I'm going to, like when I invited you to the game, I'm not leaving until you say you want to go. That's kind of my deal. If I invite you to the game, if I pay for tickets, even though I'm the person who's putting out the money, you're the guest, so I'm going to sit there. But is that kind of the model you would take with it, where if you're there and it is a business meeting, you wait for the other person to initiate it's time to go, or do you kind of try to guide them through that? Because I feel like the guests should dictate it, but it's not a hard, fast rule either.
Yeah, I think so to a certain degree. I mean, I think the dynamic. I mean, in addition to you and I being good friends, I think the dynamic was a little bit different because we were going to 3 games in 3 days, and
Yeah.
so it wasn't as if we were just going to one game. And so I think if it was maybe one game, it's like, yeah, let's stay till the end. That being said, that first game that you and I went to on what was it? I guess
Tuesday.
Wednesday of last week or Tuesday of last week or whatever it was. It was a darn near 5 hour. I think it was like a 5 hour 10-minute game. And so, if you're sitting there for a 5 hour game, I think there's certainly some latitude. I mean, like yourself, you had about an hour drive after the game, and so that's a factor, right? There's no reason for someone in the middle of the week to be getting home at midnight, 1 a.m. And so cutting it short, I at the same time, I mean, if someone invited me to a baseball game, am I going to beg, for the first time, am I going to beg out in the fourth inning?
Right.
No. There's a little bit of a middle ground there, but yeah, I think.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I like what you said
No.
there. Being aware of a couple of things. One, what is the drive of the person, and being considered that. So you get there, maybe set an expectation of, hey, where'd you come in from? Friendly, easy question. And if it's the hotel right next door, that's fine. If it's a long drive, then you consider that. But also, one of the things that you had, I think, for Tuesday night's game for Wednesday morning was you had a lot of early meetings. And so that's also a thing is, what's your day like the next day? Hey, and we check going tomorrow. Again, it's framing stuff because we're trying to build rapport. We're not trying to be cheesy. We're not trying to be salesy. You're actually trying to find valuable information to help people. And so I think those are some things. The drive thing I didn't think about, because for me the drive is just the drive. But asking people about that who are a little bit more sensitive maybe to a drive, or I didn't have anything early the next morning, so I wasn't thinking about having to get up early. I mean, I had to get up to take my kids to school, but that's kind of my normal routine. So for me, I would have gone to bed normal time and got up early time. I wasn't thinking about, hey, Ben may have to get up really early or whatever. So I think there's two things there. The drive is important, and the schedule next day. And those are things that can be asked in a way that's friendly and helpful to the person you're sitting there with. And the other thing to consider is if it's a blowout, maybe you can start saying stuff like, hey, seventh inning, look, and if you need to go, don't feel the pressure to sit here, because the guests might feel the pressure to stay because you did pay for the tickets.
Yeah, I definitely. There's a part of that dynamic. If you're inviting someone to a baseball game, I think it is kind of on you to lay out. Hey, if we want to beg out early, if we want to leave early, that's totally fine. Because I would not expect, if I were to invite someone, I would not expect them to be the first one. Like, hey, it's the sixth inning. I'm going to get out of here.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. Or if you talk offline before and you just happen to know something's going on the next day, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I know we talked about baseball before, but I just thought about it because we had a great time last week, and I was just kind of observing some of the things and how they progressed, and there was long periods of silence, and the one thing that I probably wasn't as in tune as I should have been is your dad was probably more into the games on a regular basis than we were, or at least I was, and so sometimes he'd be like, "Hey, this play's coming up," and I noticed several times that he had been following along the game, and I probably hadn't been doing a good enough job. Because of the environment, I wasn't kind of locked in on a business mode. It was kind of me and you and your dad, and so I wasn't really tuned in. But that's one thing I thought about later on was I probably need to be more aware if you're taking someone to a baseball game and they get locked in. I probably need to be a little bit more aware of who's coming up to bat. There's one time specifically he goes, "Hey, it's a big bat," and I looked up. I was like, "Oh wow, it really is a big at bat." And we've been talking or whatever. So I realized I had a deficit not being as focused as the guest was in this case all the time. So that was one of the takeaways. I realized that what, I probably need to make sure I'm following along there, because that game was a close game, or it wasn't a close game, but that bat would have made it a close game.
So to that point, I think I think it was really interesting. I mean, the dynamic. So obviously, it being my dad and you and I being as close as we are, there's a lot of dynamic in there. But I guess at a high level, I think there's a lot of utility of, rather than having like a one-on-one if you invite a couple, three people,
Yeah.
because then if it's 3 or 4 people, again, if 2 people are really locked into the game and the other 2 people are, having a really intense conversation, because I know that, like, there were a number of times in last week that you and I were talking about something totally offline, and yeah, my dad was locked into the game, but vice versa. There were times where you and my dad were having a conversation, really
Right.
just the 2 of you, and I was locked in the game. And so, it facilitates just an easier flow, and there's not a lot of pressure if if you have more people. And also, just like we did, you can sit like 2 in front of the other, and so you can kind of have 4 people talking at once. And so, because I know if you're sitting 4 people in one row, it's hard for the end people to talk together, right? But no, I think that there's some utility in just like when we went to the down to Baffin Bay. I think that dynamic, if there was just 2 people, would be very different from when we went down there were 4 of us. And so I think those kind of, thinking through how to make it, the most natural, and how to make it, the most value for the other person, I think you kind of you organically get there.
Yep. Final comment would be, is we'll get to our guest, is I think the value for listeners is when you go to regular low-key interactions, try to see what makes those work, and then try to mimic those when you're in the business, because that's kind of what I did. Was this was there was no deal we were trying to talk about. There's no pressure, but there were people who do deals and do stuff. So I was trying to, after they were over, evaluate, what I liked, what I didn't like, the things I should have done better. I think that's how you kind of duplicate that when you're trying to meet new people or network. And I know we got our guest here, so let's transition to that.
I was going to ask you if you were going to talk about the steak dinner, but yeah, we can transition. It's okay.
So let's talk about EnergyX. First off, let's get the 30-second overview. EnergyX.com is the website. EnergyX, the letter X.com, is the website. We'll link to that in the show notes. You're the CEO there. So give me the 30-second elevator pitch for you talked a little bit about lithium batteries, but what it is you guys do, what market you're trying to serve, and the genesis of how this company came about.
Yeah. So if you are not aware of the transition to sustainable energy that the world is trying to make, then you're living under a rock. So that's kind of the overarching theme of what EnergyX is all about. It's a huge wave that we're riding right now, and I would say that Tesla is probably at the forefront of that. But a transition to sustainable energy has lots of factors. One of the biggest is the transition to electric mobility. So moving away from gas combustion or internal combustion cars to battery-powered cars. Every single major auto manufacturer is transitioning their fleet to electric powered or battery powered cars. I mean, if you're talking about Volkswagen or Ford or every single one. So with that, the demand for batteries is absolutely skyrocketing. I mean, there's over 100 million cars produced every year, and every single car, one car battery is the equivalent of 10,000 iPhone batteries. So we're talking about a huge amount of batteries that are in demand right now. And then taking it back a step further, you say, well, what do you make batteries out of, right? So there's a few raw materials that make batteries, some of which can be substituted for others, but lithium is key to all of them. Lithium is the lightest element, the lightest metal element on the periodic table. And it also has really high energy density. So that's why it's been chosen as the material of choice for batteries. So what EnergyX does, the high elevator pitch, is that we are exploring breakthrough lithium ion production technologies, because until now, lithium hasn't been in high demand, and there just hasn't been that much battery demand, and there hasn't been that much other demand for things that lithium is effective for. Now there's a massive demand for batteries and for lithium. The problem is that the infrastructure that goes into producing lithium is really old. It's like, we need a lot of wood to build houses, Well, what if you had to chop down every single tree with a small axe? That would just be impossible. Um, so what they do, they improve the technology and created chainsaws, and then other machines that could cut down trees to get the wood that we need to build houses. Right now, lithium production is in the stage of a hand axe, and what we are trying to do is create better technology to increase the abundance and efficiency of lithium production. That was a little longer than the 30-second.
No worries there. And just real quick for the listener standpoint, are you guys self-funded, PE backed? I don't think you're publicly traded, but publicly traded, or how do you guys, as far as that goes, where are you at in the market?
Yeah, we're privately funded with like friends and family, venture capital. We're not PE backed yet. PE backed is usually for later stage growth companies. We're in the exciting development phase. So yeah, we have some good investors, some good strategics, and some really good partners. But yeah, we're in the early venture stage funding part.
So Teague, I'm curious, moving the conversation a little bit farther down the road here, when you guys are looking for, business development, what are the things that you're looking for? Are you guys looking for, footprints on land to be able to mine? Are you looking for partners? What is the angle in the market for you guys? What are you guys looking to address? What are some of the pain points maybe in the market that you guys are looking at and kind of see maybe being alleviated to a degree going forward? I know that was kind of a number of questions, but if you can kind of just paint a picture of where you guys are in the business and what you guys are trying to do and how who and how you're trying to get in front of.
Yeah. So once we identified that we wanted to be in this kind of lithium extraction sector, we needed to figure out what that exactly meant, right? Because there's a lot of different ways that you can be involved. One thing that we decided against was we did not want to be in lithium production itself. That would involve a lot of logistics, most likely international, because a lot of the lithium is in South America, where I was in Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. And that would involve owning land, mining, and kind of selling lithium. The price of lithium has been somewhat volatile over the past 5 or 6 years. It went up really high and then it kind of leveled out and dropped a little bit. So instead, we decided we want to be a technology company that sells our technology to the lithium production companies. All the lithium production companies know the problem that I described earlier, that they're using axes to cut down the wood as opposed to 21st century disruptive technology. So they're looking for solutions. They're trying to develop solutions internally. They're also looking for startup technology companies such as ourselves to try technology and license or buy technology. Even companies like Tesla, that's way, way up the value chain than a lithium producer, has made offers in the hundreds of millions for lithium technologies and such. So once we figured out that that's where we were, you said your podcast was a lot about figuring out the deals and negotiating. The way that I actually found this technology was once I realized the problem, that the current method was really antiquated. I envisioned a new way to do this. I was like, what if we can just extract the lithium out of the salt brine? Salt brine is like really salty water that a lot of lithium is concentrated in. What if we can just extract it through a membrane where the lithium goes out one side and then all the other bad salts go out the other side? And it was kind of a stroke of luck and being in the right place at the right time. This group out of the University of Texas had just released the first publication about a membrane that could selectively separate different ions in a solution. So I read this article that was published in Science Advances, which is one of the top publications. And the first thing I did after I read it was I looked up the author's email on the University of Texas website and emailed him. I had to email him, I think, 3 or 4 times before he responded. So persistence is also a key. And as soon as he responded, I told him that I wanted to fly down to Texas and meet with him. So I think it was only a couple weeks later, I hopped on a plane, flew down, took him out to dinner. And, I was still in the kind of due diligence phase. Like, what is this technology all about? Does it work? Who's involved? Who are the other authors? Who holds the IP? Who filed the patents? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. But I would say that, one thing that I am is persistent. That trip to Texas led me on a trip to Australia because the co-authors and the co-inventors, and really the partners on this project are the University of Texas and 2 institutions out of Australia. So one is Monash University in Melbourne, and the other is CSIRO, which is the Australian National Laboratory. So I had to fly over there and meet the inventors there, and I had to get everybody to agree that I was the right person to license this technology to.
So let me ask you that. And I don't mischaracterize what you said. I'm making sure I'm following along. It sounds like you found an article that talks about a topic that you were interested in. You wouldn't consider, if I understand correctly, your time at that time yourself an expert, but you were interested and you wanted to go and pursue, the potential revenue path or company path or whatever you want to say involved with this. How do you balance that? Because Ben and I've talked about this before on the show and offline. Is if you want to get into a new market or a new business. Sometimes there's that fine line between being a subject matter expert, but also showing that you're willing to engage, you're willing to do the hard work. So how do you balance that how did you balance that when you're trying to get into this space and you've got a lot of questions, you have some answers, but as you said, you got you're persistent. So how did you balance out these people saying, hey, I want to know more about this, I am interested, but also letting them know that maybe you're not the foremost authority on the topic as well?
Yeah, I think that in business, there's a lot of different aspects to creating a successful company. This business is very reliant on the science, but there's this kind of gap between the science and the industry, right? So one thing that I brought to the party was I said, look, I don't really know about the science. I'm willing to learn, and I want to learn as much as I can, and I want to be a fresh set of eyes and ears on this thing, because quote unquote experts in the field know the way that it's been done up till now. They don't know the way that it can be done in the future, right? It takes kind of almost like an expert generalist that cross pollinates different ideas to be able to introduce disruptive technology to a field that is reluctant to change. So that was one aspect that I think was interesting. This was a very new field, but the other aspect that was interesting was I said, look, I know all the clients or all the end customers that would really want to use this thing. At that point, I'd been down to South America twice, and I had met with a few people at these big lithium production companies. There were only a handful, really, because it was still pretty nascent, still is a pretty nascent industry. But a few of the big ones are Albemarle, which is a $10 billion New York Stock Exchange traded company. Same with SQM. They're based in Chile, but they're a New York Stock Exchange traded company, $10 billion market cap. So I said, look, if we can develop this thing, I have these customers. And then I took one of the University of Texas colleagues down to South America with me, and met with 3 of the biggest potential clients that could be the end customer and license the technologies. So that was a pretty big move. You know, you have to show your value, right? Like what can you bring to the table? And even if you think it's all about connecting the dots, right? It's saying, I'm going to get this technology and then find these customers and then bring in these partners and then build my team and negotiate this deal and source this good or um, so really what my job is just to connect the dots and be the glue in between all this all these different moving parts. um,
No, that's helpful because I think a lot of times we'll see public figures, and you might look at someone and go, "God, wow, this guy really has it all figured out." But the reality is the team, the partners, the consultants, etc. They're kind of the expert technicians, if you will. And the front man isn't that he's not knowledgeable or not skilled or any of that stuff, but he has to be the one to take what they're saying, translate that message to investors, to other companies, and so sometimes I think we it's hard to find that balance of being an expert but also being able to message it. And I think what you're saying on some level is you can partner with the SMEs, learn from them, get a better understanding, but then also take that and be able to communicate it where they're not really focused on that, so you can kind of play that middleman role, if you will.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that couldn't be more true. Another, something you said there that I missed was bringing in investors. It's another huge aspect of connecting all the dots. And one thing that I've learned during the beginnings of this company is that there's a somewhat large disconnect between the academic world and industry. These universities are amazing places with so much talent, um, and great facilities for research. I mean, I'm actually sitting in one right now where they have just vast labs. They can do tons of different things, but bringing a technology from the lab scale to producing hundreds of thousands of tons of lithium is, a monumental task. It's and a lot of the people in academia aren't even really interested in that. It's they're more interested in the fundamental research and then getting their research published in these prestigious academic publications such as Science, which goes on to uh, uh, get them more grant money awarded from government institutions to repeat that cycle. And it's obviously very good coming up with you know breakthrough technologies, but it there's a huge gap in doing that and actually applying the technology. And I'm at the beginning of a marathon right now. Like, even though this technology has worked in a lab scale and maybe a little bit bigger, there's still a very long way to go and a lot of problems. And every day I face hurdles, uh, big hurdles, whether it's sourcing the raw material to make the product or testing the product at a larger scale. It might not work the same, or testing the product on a real world environment as opposed to a synthetic environment in the lab. uh, there's just a million things in between figuring out a new technology in a university and then deploying it in the field on a large scale.
Okay, I know we are up against the clock here, so let's plug a few more times. EnergyX.com. Folks are listening, they might want to connect, might have questions, might want to reach out and just kind of maybe get 2 cents, get your 2 cents on something they're working on. Is there somewhere else they can find you or connect with you at?
EnergyX.com is the place. If you go on my profile, all my stuff is connected on there. My LinkedIn, my Instagram, my Facebook, my email is on there.
Okay.
I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Yeah, just find me on EnergyX.com.
Okay, we'll link to that. And look, maybe 6 months or whatever, we'd love to get you back on again to kind of talk about how things are developed. Because as you mentioned, it is whether you're putting together a deal in the sense of trying to build a business, there's multiple deals that you're working on at one time. So we'd love to catch up with you 6 months or 8 months down the road and see the lessons you've learned, things that came up that you didn't expect. As you said, there's hurdles every day. Sometimes you think they're easy and they try to be hard. Sometimes you think they're hard, try to be easy. Sometimes they're hard. You think they're hard and they are hard. So, kind of walk you through that process. But Teague, thank you again so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Have a good one.
And once again, that was Teague Egan, the founder and CEO of EnergyX, EnergyX.com. We'll link to that in the show notes. Ben, a lot of good stuff. Had a little bit of conversation offline with some good stuff. One thing he pointed out offline, I'm sure he will follow up when he comes on the future, is you don't get for things you don't ask. Sounds simple, sounds cliche, but right on the money there is that you don't get for the things you don't ask for normally. And so, Ben, I'm going to ask you right now to make a donation for the Ryan Ray Foundation for reasons, $1 million. So I'm going to take his advice and shoot. Can I get $1 million?
So I think the qualifier to what he said is that if you're going to shoot, when you shoot, it should be a good shot as opposed to just like blindfolded and kind of chucking at the backboard. And so for reasons, I'm not going to donate $1 million. But if the reasons turns into something more substantial and you actually want to talk about it, absolutely. If you're trying to just negotiate for these board seats that you've been at for the last 2 weeks, that's another conversation that we can have offline if you'd like. But I'm happy to share the pie if it makes sense.
Okay, listeners, thank you so much for coming in. Leave us a rating and a review on iTunes and bringingtheclosures.com podcast. Bringingtheclosures.com. You can find us on LinkedIn. Love to hear feedback, and we will talk to you.